When it comes to cybersecurity, it's not a question of if, but when you'll get hit. That's one of the headlines coming out of today's show. And yes, small business owners and startup founders, we are talking to you. Plus, our tech expert today is talking AI, building company culture through the last 2 decades of evolving technology, I might add. And he has some personal advice, some unexpected advice for startup founders and small business owners, life, relationship, and the grind. It's all today on Expert Connections. We've ridden a number of waves in technology over the last several decades, the advent of the internet, the dot-com era. Of course, now the big wave, AI. Welcome to Expert Connections. I'm Julie Holton. We're going to talk about a number of these waves. Today, we welcome to the show Chad Paalman. He is the CEO and co-founder of NuWave Technology Partners, also co-founder of Prescott. Chad, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Julie. This is a pleasure.
I'm glad to have you here. So many topics to dive into. And I want to start with what feels like maybe the most in your face topic right now, which is the evolution of technology. I feel like for a lot of business owners who are tuning in, it's a lot to handle right now. All the headlines are about AI. And so how do you know if you are, well, probably way behind as a business owner and what to do, what not to do? So let's kind of like back that up a little bit and look at this from a business owner or leader perspective. What technology, what do we need to know? What should we really be focusing on when it comes to technology for our businesses?
That's a great question to kick things off, Julie. So I'm going to answer that question maybe in our conversation in a couple of different ways. On one end of the spectrum, I always talk about technology like a tool, and no different than if you want to use a construction analogy or a medical tool analogy. You don't, for example, in construction, you don't use a hammer to screw in a screw, right? So that's where I always start is what is the job to be done? And in business, running in business, and any business leader or owner that's listening to this is knows this all too well, is there's always another tool. There's always more technology that can be invested in. But what is it that you're trying to do? Is it a line of business application that will, maybe it's something that will allow you to sell more or service your client better, or is it something cybersecurity related? So is it reducing risk? So I always start with that is only invest in the things that you really need and that are going to move the needle. I'm a nerd, so I have all kinds of technology, and just ask my wife. It's like I have tons of technology. But when it comes to business and what technology you should have for your business, what should you invest in? Start with the plan of. I always start with where are you going with your business, and then align those technology investments, the things I just talked about, align those to your business plan.
You must see a lot of clients come through the door who are trying their best, but perhaps making mistakes along the way. When it comes to IT specifically, what are some of the most common mistakes that you see businesses make?
Yeah, it's the small business owner and business leaders that are probably the most challenged right now. I was the board chair for the Small Business Association of Michigan, and when I was on the board, one of the things that we looked at just a few years ago was how do we help these small businesses that, first of all, it's budget related, it's just bandwidth related, and it's the small business owner is really more challenged than I would say just about any other size business because of all of those realities. They don't have the same budget to make investments into cybersecurity and line of business applications and any of the other technologies that as you get larger and you scale, you can start making those investments. I think the biggest thing that I see, you're going to probably have to pull me back, Julie. I love right now talking about cybersecurity and AI. You'll hear me say that probably a lot as we're talking today. But when it comes to cybersecurity, I think it's the single biggest risk that businesses have. More probable than fire, flood, just about any other things that could happen in embezzlement. Anything bad things that could happen. I always joke as a business owner, you wake up every day not knowing what bad thing could possibly happen that you never even thought of. Maybe there's that hurricane or who knows, right? But a cybersecurity event is statistically the most probable thing that is going to actually happen to a business today. And I see apathy is the word I would use that I see with too many business owners and business leaders today is a couple different reasons. One is they think they're too small to be a target. They have this thought that, hey, it hasn't happened before. Why would it happen? There's a lot of reasons why it happens, but I think apathy is around cybersecurity is I would say the biggest challenge. And then having a trusted IT person or IT professional. Gone are the days where one person can do it all. Even within my organization, I don't have one person that can, and when I say can do it, can be an expert at everything. So that is the challenge that a small business has. Is even if they've got a lot of times I see relatives will help out, or they've got a friend, or they've got a boutique, maybe they've got an IT professional that is. Maybe a sole entrepreneur that's helping them out. But having somebody that you can trust, but then also having a network that you can tap into, as you scale, and then maybe as the business gets larger, they can bring in a professional firm like NuWave to help them with their IT needs.
Absolutely. Our marketing agency saw that firsthand with a client we were working with through Connections, a nonprofit client that, and the only thing worse than being targeted by a cybersecurity attack is not having that trusted partner to turn to when you need to immediately take some of those steps that really only someone with expertise like NuWave has to know what to do. Chad, for business owners who maybe feel like they're already tech savvy, but they're still not IT experts, what essentials should they consider? What might they be missing that they need to consider?
I'll start with and feel like I get preachy when I talk about this, so I'll try not to get preachy, but I talk over and over again with businesses and even clients and not clients, everybody that has a business that will listen to me, is stop thinking about if and start planning for when. There's a gentleman named Kyle who is the CEO of a company called Huntress in our space, and I'm going to give him credit for this because I loved it when I heard it, and it is so true that businesses that are in Florida don't think about having a plan for a hurricane, right? They have a plan for a hurricane. And I think about cybersecurity as that hurricane. So I always say to businesses, do you have a plan for when you're going to get hit by a cybersecurity event, not if? And even taking that a step further, as we onboard new clients now for the last few years, we actually have taken what we call an assumed breach position. And honestly, that came out of a near miss. We were bringing on a new client who had an internal IT person, and unbeknownst to the internal IT person. So think about that. This company has an internal person who we take care of clients in one of two ways: either fully managed, where we do everything, or we augment an internal team. So this is a scenario, and we call that co-managed. So this was a scenario where we were coming in to work with an internal IT person that didn't know that they had a threat actor in their network and had been in their network, business email compromise. So only did that threat actor make themselves known when they saw the email correspondence, because they were reading all the email of this company's executives and their internal IT, that we were going to start deploying our tools. So they knew they were going to get found out. So they waited right up till the 11th hour, the day before we were going to start deploying tools, and they encrypted the entire network. So that's that I tell those stories like this because these things happen every day, and that business thankfully had backups that they could restore from. That story doesn't always end that way. So I always talk to businesses, business leaders, business owners, have a plan and take that idea that what if I have a complete network outage that I don't have any access to my data, I can't recover from backups, and then you start thinking about, okay, if my business is going to survive because everything's digital now, what are the things that I would need to have? And I've got stories I could talk about for days, Julie, that these things really happen, and they happen, like I said, they happen every day, they happen every week. So some of the things that you start taking inventory of are contact list, like customer list, maybe key partners, attorneys, insurance, people that you are going to need to get a hold of, even things like sales. If you lost all of your network access, and let's just say indefinitely, would you even know what sales were even on the books? So having maybe a copy of your financials, it seems maybe strange that the IT guy is telling you to print things off, but I'm telling you to have things printed off that are things that if you didn't have access to your network, what are the things, even contacts, like I said, if just everyday contacts. So many people have all of their contacts stored in their email system, and when that gets compromised, even your phone, your phone numbers. I remember my wife's number. I don't even know my kid's number, right? So if you think about that, how do you call somebody if you don't have access to your contacts? And then the last thing on that point is test your plan. It's one thing to have a plan, but inevitably, every time you test that plan, you're going to find out something that you didn't think about. And I use the example of marketing. Okay, we know that we have data, we've got our financial data and our customer data, and maybe we think about some of the other more obvious data. But what about marketing data? That's pretty important data. And the marketing department had a system that nobody else thought of, and it had a lot of important data in it. So by the time you start testing your plan, you'll start finding those, and it's not a one and done scenario. Have a regular cadence. Maybe it's a couple times a year, or at least once a year. Have that cadence of actually testing your plan.
Chad, this is not related to cybersecurity, but you reminded me of a story that I went through back in, what was it, maybe 2002? When was the great power grid outage in Michigan
Oh
that we
yeah,
had in the
yeah,
Northeast?
yeah.
I was working in a newsroom in Lansing when that happened. And so, imagine, power goes out, no lights, no computers, nothing. All of our phones were basically, most of them were landline phones, right? Like we did have cell phones, and back, it wasn't way back then, right, in the 1900s, as our kids say,
Right,
but early 2000s. And so we didn't have any phone numbers saved. We didn't know how to access even the CBS national. So anyway, it was really interesting to watch a group of people try to figure out who do we call, how do we call, what is even happening. So I remember from even that of like, oh yeah, phone books. What are those? Let's pull those
right,
out and use
right.
those. So one step further, absolutely having all of the vital information to continue running your company should there be some sort of shutdown cybersecurity attack. You mentioned in the very beginning looking at technology as a tool and deciding what tool to use based on what job needs to be accomplished. How can businesses effectively look at and assess their current technology stack in order to make sure that it aligns with their objectives?
Sure. I'm a big fan of getting a second opinion, and I even tell my clients at NuWave. I say I have no problem with you having somebody come in and give a second opinion. There's firms that do that professionally. They'll come in and do that. Even other MSP peers. Nobody likes that sometimes, right? To have somebody looking over their shoulders, but I sit on a bank board, and it's in that world, in the banking community, it's required to have a third party audit, regular routine audits. And I wish that was more common and regular in the unregulated business space, where you have that second opinion. You think about in medical, right? If I go to my primary care provider and everything's great, and then I see a specialist for whatever reason, they say, "Hey, you had this thing for a long time, that your primary care provider, or your the person you always go to." So I don't know if that answers your question, Julie, but I'm a big fan of just getting a second opinion. Doing the tabletop test, or the testing the plan that I talked about, that in itself is going to bring out things that maybe you never thought of. And then the last point I'll make is that we're an EOS company, and for those of you listening that aren't familiar with EOS, the Entrepreneur Operating System, I'm an unpaid spokesperson for EOS. We've run our company on it for 8 years. It was a game changer. That forced us, or really, I would say, matured us into having plans and having budgets, things that we didn't do when we first started 19 years ago. And fast forward to today, we actually manage our clients that way. We manage our clients using the EOS framework, and all of our clients. One of the things, a commitment that I make and we make to our clients, is that if you're a client of NuWave, you'll have a 3-year technology plan, and you'll have a budget. So the budget is important, and because a lot of companies find that IT is a black hole of expenses, they never know, okay, what am I going to be told next week or next month that this thing I didn't see coming? But the plan, very importantly, needs to align to your business strategy. If you know where, if you have a plan, hopefully you have a plan for where you're taking your business, then back to the tool comment, align the plan with the requirements of technology. You should know, what's it going to cost to add a new person, or maybe I'm going to add 5 or 10 new employees. If your IT firm or your IT professional should be able to give you that and say, Julie, if you're going to add a person, here's what it's going to cost. And it's not just the cost of adding the person, but the technology. Maybe they need a laptop, or any of the things they're going to need. If you're going to add a new facility, you're going to buy a company, any of those things like that that are going to be involved in your business plan, done with a professional firm like NuWave, we will actually make sure that your technology plan and budget align to your business plan.
Chad, you mentioned 19 years. That's a great milestone, coming up on 20 years of being in business with NuWave Technology Partners. How has technology evolved over the last 19 years? Like, give us a, I mean, were cell phones even around when you started?
Um, yeah, I had a Motorola flip phone, and it was the coolest phone ever, right? You had to, if you remember, that was,
Actually, I know some IT folks who still use flip phones.
yeah.
So
I actually miss my flip phone. It was great. But to put it into perspective, in 2005, the iPhone hadn't even been released. It wasn't released until the summer of 2007. So we went through, flip phones and Blackberries and iPhones, and technology has changed so much. I even look into the horizon and say, what does 19 years from now look like? I mean, we already know about the Rabbit AI assistants and the AI pins that are already here today, but that's here today? What's 19 years from now? So yeah, it's changed a lot, Julie.
all right, Chad. So, yeah, what will it look like in 19 years? Everyone is talking about AI. Not everyone loves it, especially as you're talking about small business owners. I mean, talk about another complication, especially if their business is not necessarily in the technology space, but obviously uses technology as a tool. What is New Wave's approach to AI?
New Wave's approach to AI is I'll say we're all in. Being in the space that we're in, when we first started seeing, I'll use what everybody's familiar with is going to be like the Chat GPTs, and AI has been around for a long time. For those in that space know that it's not new, but I always use for any technology. I always say, when my relatives start talking about it at regular dinners, or friends start talking about it who aren't in technology, now it's mainstream, right? And so if you think about over the last couple of years with I'll say mainstream AI, we had a decision to make, and we just said we're going to be on the front end of that. We've had a mantra at NuWave for years. We've always said we're going to be bleeding edge to keep our clients leading edge. It's just something we've always said. And so I'll give Pete Tarrant on our team and John Liebert's on our team. I think you've met both of them, of course, Julie. Here's how all in we are in AI. John's got a AI 10 hertz, I think is his license plate, and Pete's is AI love. I'm just totally out of these guys. So if you see him driving around that license plate, you're gonna know
I
who these
did
guys.
not know that about
Yeah,
those two. Love
yeah.
it.
So we're all in on AI, and in fact, Pete's got a saying that he's been saying, or a phrase, I guess he's been saying, that I agree with, and it's that when it comes to AI, there's only going to be two companies that really exist in the maybe even the short term. But I think Pete's phrase is that there are two types of companies: those that are embracing AI, and those that will either be put out of business or bought by the companies that embraced AI. And that's a pretty bold statement to make, right? And I know a lot of business owners, a lot of business leaders who disagree with me on this. And then I tell them, and Julie, I'm sure you've read this book, Mo Gauda. He's the former, what is he, the chief business officer or was for Google X. He's got a book, Scary Smart. And I believe that maybe it's not completely the realistic glimpse into the future, but I think there's a lot of truth, when being in this now for the last couple of years and seeing where things are going. I challenge anybody that says that AI isn't going to just fundamentally change not only the business world, but it's going to change all of our lives.
I completely agree with that, and we'll have to have you and Pete and John on the AI segment to talk more about what NuWave is doing with AI. You've got some really cool things that you're doing, even internally, as
Yeah.
you, like you said, go all in on AI. I want to now, though, focus a little bit more on a little touch of the personal side, if you will. 19 years in business, and here we have this major, I think, wave coming, if you will. Like you've seen a number of waves in technology through the last 19 years. AI, of course, being the next big wave that, as you said, is already here. It's been here. Talk about, from kind of the employee standpoint, the kind of internal culture, if you will. It takes a lot to be able to, especially with a company that has to roll with all of those waves, all of those changes in how you do what you do. How Tell me a little bit about what really makes New Wave and keeps your team together.
Yeah. I'm I pinch myself every day, and I don't mean that sarcastically. It is just, it's such a neat opportunity that I've been given. I really feel blessed to have the organization that we have. I've got, over a half dozen people on the team that have been with us since we started, and that's unheard of in our space. Very, very key people that I think of as family, and I don't know, maybe because my brother and I and my dad, I don't know if you knew that, Julie. My dad, Rick, and my brother Kyle, the three of us started the company in 2005 together. Um, and I'll give my dad credit. It was Kyle and I's crazy idea, and Kyle and I wore him out, and he finally said, if we write a business plan and all the things that you should do, that, as 20-some-year-old kids, we didn't know that you should do those things. So a lot of sage advice from my dad, and we did that. But to answer your question, I think the thing that is culture. To me, it's the number one thing, is that if you don't have great relationships, which by the way are one of our core values, is our core values are trust, knowledge, relationship, and gas. And gas stands for give a shit. I don't tell too many people that. They go, "What's gas stand for?" Gas. But it really is that idea that you care, and that you care about each other, you care about your clients, you care about taking care of people. You really just genuinely care, because that the other ones I talked about, trust builds great relationships. If you've got trust in somebody, well, you can't have a relationship without trust. So we have all of that. And then back to my point of Kyle and I and my dad starting the company, that family dynamic. I think that is internally as well. And it's not just me saying that. I hear that all the time from our team, that they just love that it is like a family. And that's not always easy, right? My brother and I, my dad retired about 10 years ago, and my brother and I have been running the company since then. It's not always easy. Kyle and I have this I don't even know if it's a joke with each other, because it's actually completely true. We go on a family ski trip every year together, him and his family and kids, and my family and my kids are both graduating from college right now. But so if we ever get to the point where we don't want to go on ski trips together, then pull the chute on the business. And so we've really done a good job of having respect for each other, and never getting it to the point where it gets personal. And we're that way internally as well with our team. So are we perfect? No, but I will put our team up against any other team out there. We have a great group of people on our team.
Chad, having met some members of your team as an outsider, I can say, I can vouch for what you're saying. You truly have a team that really feels that they're part of the family. And that's a really, it's interesting, like from a psychological perspective too, like the psychology of business, of, how do you create that and how do you maintain that? I think that building relationships, everyone out there will, every book, every online resource will say that you have to build strong relationships, and every marketer will say you have to emphasize relationships. But NuWave actually does it, and does it successfully. If you had to boil it down to one thing, kind of like internally, externally with your clients, what is it that helps you to really build those authentic relationships?
Yeah, I'll start internally first. Is fostering that idea of presence, of time with each other, and being virtual. It is harder, right? We, as our team grows and as we grow as an organization, now we've got people that are even not just spread out across Michigan, they're spread out across the country now. So that idea of making time for each other, getting to know each other, I think is number one. Externally, I'll give you a real example right now. We've got a new client, and I find it extremely important. One of the things that I personally always try to do is to develop those relationships. And Kyle, my brother, is the same way. Is developing relationships with the clients that we serve. And so we've got a new client, and actually next week I'm meeting him, and we're going to meet after work, have a beverage after work, and just talk. It's just building those relationships. I don't know if there's a secret sauce, Julie, and to answer your question, but it is showing people that you care. When you have those difficult conversations, and like I said, we're not perfect. We make mistakes. Own it. When you make a mistake, own it. And even in my position as the CEO of the company, when I make a mistake, I will tell you I made a mistake. And I think people appreciate that okay, the CEO is willing to acknowledge publicly that he or she made a mistake. That goes a long way with your team. So there's probably a lot of things I'd have to think about. I don't, yeah, and maybe we just really lucked out and got a great group of people. I don't know.
Well, Chad, some leaders will say that that secret sauce includes, at least in as one ingredient, personal development and working on yourself as you were also work on the business. And I know that for you, Entrepreneurs Organization is a fairly new addition to that. Can you talk about why it was important to you to join a group like Entrepreneurs Organization? Maybe talk a little bit about what it is and why you want to be a part of it.
Yeah, I joined EO. I started feeling like I was being triangulated. Everybody I talked to, other business owners, and I mean that in a fun, sarcastic way, in a good way actually, because enough people that I know and know and trust and like in not just in Michigan, all around the country in the business community. I just kept hearing EO over and over again, and I was at an event last fall, and an EO leader on the east side of Michigan. I got to know him at this event, and I was so impressed with his authenticity and willingness to just have really candid, transparent conversations about that some would say were borderline personal, about himself, his business, his career, his challenges. And I just thought, wow, this guy is what a neat guy. And then he got talking about EO and how this is just part of EO. And I thought, okay, if this is just part of EO, and then it tied back to the other people that I'd mentioned that I also know are in EO, and then the stories I hear of relationships and lifelong relationships that are forged in EO, I thought, okay, I need to check this out, and I did. I checked it out last fall, and just in my early, only being in EO now for a few months, just my early introduction to it, it is what I thought it would be. Is it fosters that idea of business owners getting together, spending time with each other, and it's not just work, right? There's more to all of us as business owners than just the business that we lead. You've got the family dynamic, and you've got the personal dynamic, and I'd say that those are some things. Happy to talk about those now or in a future conversation with you, Julie. But just taking care of yourself physically, taking all of the spokes of your wheel of making sure that you are good and that your relationships are good personally. Who else do you talk to about those things? I can tell you, my wife, she doesn't want to hear about my business challenges. My friends don't want to hear about my whatever challenges. And so this is the EO is that place that intentionally is I'll call it a safe space where confidentially you can sit with others that are either in your same position of the challenges that you're maybe dealing with, or have been in that position, or maybe have watched other peers go through that. So I've just really enjoyed some of the initial conversations I've had, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is just the beginning. Watch out.
I love hearing that. What is it so far about EO? Even in just these first couple of months, these last couple of months, what is it about EO that you think maybe is something that people may not necessarily know right away, or maybe one thing that's drawn you to EO that someone may not see necessarily until they're in it?
I shared that I'm going through a transition in my life right now. My kids moved out of the house, and the business. I'm at that place where we have an amazing leadership team. For the first time, Kyle and I looked at each other at the end of last year. We were doing our annual planning, looked at each other and said, "Oh my gosh, we have an amazing leadership team that they literally can run the company, and allowing Kyle and I to work on other, strategic things. We never had that. It always required Kyle and I to oversee or be involved in every decision. So with the business being where it's at, that it's not that it doesn't need me, but it doesn't need me to make every decision. My kids have, they're adults now, and they don't need me for every decision. And so just all of these changes in life, I had that conversation and with the peers at EO, and one of the responses back was that, oh, you're it was just kind of like, telling me maybe what I already knew, but just helping me unpack my current reality of my current situation where I'm at, and then helping me say, okay, now what? And so I've done a lot of that now what thinking over the last couple of months, and it's for me that's exciting. It's invigorating. It gives me that new energy, and then and the team's like, oh no, Chad's got a bunch of new ideas. So that, I don't know if that answers your question, Julie, but it's a place where I'm having conversations and dialogue and feedback that I don't have in other parts of my life. And I will say actually that I am very fortunate. I've got four best friends I grew up with that all own businesses. We've been friends since grade school. We get together once a month for breakfast. We've been doing it for several years, and we just talk about business. That group is amazing, and I mean, these are like my brothers. I've known them since, like I said, since grade school. But it's different when you've got somebody who doesn't know you, like in EO, and maybe willing to ask you questions that some of your best friends won't ask you because they don't maybe they know better else, so they did not ask you those questions.
That was excellent, Chad, and really a lot of truth in that that I think a lot of business owners can relate to. I mean, sometimes strangers, or those who maybe are in the position of, like, whether it's a consultant or someone who is someone like in your EO forum, someone
Yeah.
who's in the position of asking those hard questions, knowing that the answers will help you get to a better place. Sometimes even more so than close family and friends who are also cheering us on and want the best for us and want us to feel good in the moment, but may not always be able to ask those tough questions. That makes a lot of sense of what EO can bring to someone, in a business. There's so many topics that we could go into, and I could keep you all day with multiple segments on this show. One last question I want to ask as we kind of wrap things up here, looking at business owner who is in the grind right now in one way or another, either dealing with personal life that then is impacting business, or just a really difficult challenge within the business, working on scaling, whatever that grind, whatever that moment might be. What is your advice for that business owner?
Yeah, it depends on if you're talking about a business owner that's maybe in that early stage, just getting started. Julie, I've told you the story before that I remember that those times, and it's at that point in the business where, for in my case, it was Kyle and my dad Rick, the three of us just, and then the initial team that we had, everybody just did everything. There was no structure. It was, people call it a flat org chart. We didn't even have, there was no org chart. It was that, here's the mission, here's what we got to do, get it done, and everybody was helping each other. And and along the way, and the story I was just going to share with you is that I realized, well, no, actually, I say my wife punched me in the gut, and I mean that with a ton of love that she did it, because I wasn't taking care of myself physically, and I wasn't taking care of myself, my relationship, my family, and I was so hyper focused on the business, and making sure it didn't fail, and growing it, and all of the all of the things that are involved in getting a business off the ground, that when you don't have a team and it's just a few of you, you're doing everything. Sarah was at the E-Myth, where Sarah's the pie maker. She's making the cake and baking the cake and then selling the cake and then billing for the, it's like you're doing everything. So my long answer to your question is, as you're growing the business, don't forget to, number one, take care of yourself. That's physically, that's spiritually, that's all of the aspects of yourself. Take care of yourself. And I didn't do that. And if I look back, that's a mistake I made. The other thing is, take care of them, those most important relationships in your life. And if you are, if you've got a significant other, if you got a spouse, if you've got kids, don't let them be the victims of your success. And my wife said to me, and I'll end on this. I tell this story to a lot of people over the years, is that we had two little kids, and we were a few years into the business. And my wife said, "Hey, do you want to have a third child?" And I looked at her like, "Are you crazy?" And I said, "Why would you want a third?" And because it was just like it was so much work, the kids and everything else. And she's like, "Well, you missed out on the first two." I'm just like, "Oh my gosh!" And what she meant by that wasn't I wasn't just wasn't home much. And this was before the ability to work remotely. And so, we were grinding so much that and I'll take personal responsibility for that. I didn't put the attention into the most important relationship in my life, my wife and my kids. So that would be my advice, is really make sure that you're well rounded, and you don't get so focused on growing the business that everything else is sacrificed.
Absolutely, Chad. Great advice. You don't want to miss out on what you want life to look like, whether that's pieces of home, pieces of work, all of that. Chad Paalman, CEO and co founder of NuWave Technology Partners. And Prescott, thank you for being on the show today. Really appreciate having you and your insights. That is all for this episode of Expert Connections. You can stay tuned for the next video in our Expert Connections series, and we'll see you next time.